I didn't want to just pay homage to this character. If I want to, bask in the glory of this character, I can just watch a Wolfman movie. If I'm going to actually go to the trouble of making a film, I think I have to say something new.
Hi, I'm David Crow with Den of Geek, and I'm here with Leigh Whannell, the director of The Wolfman. And Leigh, it's a pleasure to have you, and I do have to ask, what are your earliest memories of the 1941 Wolfman?
Ooh, well, I didn't see the original 1941 Wolfman for quite some time. My earliest memories of the Wolfman character is Abbott and Costello. Abbott and Costello versus the Wolfman, and it was kid-friendly stuff like Mad Monster Party and some of the funnier movies like the Abbott Costello stuff. So that's really it for me. It took me a long time to catch up with some of the classic horror stuff, in the real stuff.
Well, he was my favorite as a kid, and as I got older, I realized you really feel sorry for this character, and the appeal is the tragedy of what's happening to him. And do you think that's something that might apply to your Wolfman?
I'm so relieved to hear you say that, because that's really what I was pushing hard on, is the tragic angle.
How did you come to your idea towards this archetype? How did you want to make it fresh?
I knew I had to come up with a version that not only interested me, but justified the movie's existence. I didn't want to just pay homage to this character. If I want to, bask in the glory of this character, I can just watch a Wolfman movie. If I'm going to actually go to the trouble of making a film, I think I have to say something new. And, I was very inspired by two 80s remakes that I love so much are David Cronenberg's The Fly and John Carpenter's The Thing. And obviously they're remaking these movies that were made in a different time in black and white, but they brought a really modern sensibility for that time to the movie. They really justified their existence. And so with this, I was thinking, what am I going to do? And without giving anything away, I sort of came up with a way, I think, of internalizing it. Rather than watching someone transform, you're actually experiencing the transformation from within the character,
The Wolfman, I'm happy to say, it's a project I've been passionate about for a very, very, very long time, since before we did Invisible Man with Leigh. I always thought if Invisible Man worked, I'd love to try and tackle Wolfman and try to do to Wolfman what Leigh did to Invisible Man. And I would describe that as taking the monster and taking it out of trying to make it a 4-quadrant movie for everybody and returning it to its roots, which is like a straight horror movie. Mm-hmm. And Wolfman is a very, very scary, bloody monster movie. And it's in the tradition of how they used to be a long, long time ago, but more recently in the tradition of The Invisible Man. And I love it, and I can't wait for people to finally get to see it.
Was The Wolfman one of your favorites growing up?
The Wolfman was, I guess Dracula was my favorite, but The Wolfman was a close second. My mother and I, we loved The Wolfman for sure.
I know obviously Leigh is a big part of this, but do you look at all the Universal monsters and you think, for example, do you look at like Bride of Frankenstein and go, well, this is what you'd have to do to bring her into a modern audience? Well,
we worked actually, I've looked at all the monster movies, and I don't really want the responsibility of like, Blumhouse is going to do all the monster movies, because I really don't know what we would do with them. It's kind of on a case-by-case basis. We worked, for the way, on Bride of Frankenstein for a little bit, but I could never figure out a path to making it. It was always sort of funny or always campy, and I could never get a path to making it like a straight horror movie, and so we didn't tackle it. But there now is a cousin of Bride of Frankenstein, right? That Maggie Gyllenhaal. It is Maggie Gyllenhaal's directing, yeah.
Poor Things is kind of Bride of Frankenstein.
And Poor Things is kind of Bride of Frankenstein. That's its own version of it, yeah.
to focus back on the Wolfman, is it important to you to make a werewolf movie that is scary, but also maybe like the original one, something that audiences are emotionally invested in?
Yeah, that's what we try and do that with all our movies. We don't always succeed, but you try and get scary and emotional. And as you know, the more emotional something is, the scarier it can be. The more you care about the characters, the more that you're invested in their actual real life story, the scares are more effective and scarier. And I think The Wolfman, like Invisible Man, is about a man turning into a wolf, but also about a relationship between these two people going very south.
The reason it always was so effective for me as a kid, The Wolfman, the original, was you felt so bad for this poor schmuck.
Yeah. Well, those feelings will come back when you see the new movie.
The Wolfman and so many werewolf movies are about a character going to a strange land and being cursed. Mm-hmm. Your film is about him bringing it home to his family. Mm-hmm. So could you talk about, the dynamic of the family in this movie?
Yeah, I mean, this family in this movie is kind of underwater. They're stressed. It's like a lot of modern families these days. I know for myself, especially during COVID and post-COVID, like being a parent, it's just became extra tough, and it's just getting harder and harder, and it's relentless. And I wanted to present that side of family life, the difficult part of it, because it is tough every single day to be in a long-term relationship, to raise kids. It's really, really hard. And so in this movie, I wanted to sort of present the idea that you're with these people, you're taking them for granted, and then somebody is suddenly sick. The way disease just suddenly appears in our life,
Well, the comparison to the original was people thought Lon Chaney was great in the role because he knew what it was like to transform at night due to a drinking problem. Do you think a metaphor like that could be prescient here?
Not so much with the drinking problem. I think that is a great way to look at that character. I mean, it's one of the things about horror movies and monster movies in particular is they wrap around metaphors really well. Mm-hmm. That's why I think they've lasted so long. I'm thinking all the time about why these characters. There's not many literary characters that are still in the pop culture consciousness, and the ones that are, like Sherlock Holmes, Oliver Twist, Dracula. What is it about those characters that had the staying power? I mean, for something to last that long, for Romeo and Juliet to still be a thing, that's an incredible piece of writing that kids today know exactly what Romeo and Juliet is. So I'm always thinking about what causes that. And I think in the case of the monsters, their durability, you can take a character like Dracula and you can apply that to the metaphor of like big banks. Dracula could be a hedge fund manager sucking the lifeblood of do you know what I mean? And it's scary, right? And maybe horror fans out there hate that. They're like, don't give us metaphors about, the financial industry draining people's, just give us a monster. But I always think you can have your cake and eat it. You can do both. And I tried to do that with this, but not so much in terms of alcoholism or toxic masculinity or something like that. For me, it was more like, I'll put it to you like this. Again, sorry I keep saying this, but I'm trying not to spoil anything. Mm-hmm. I wanted this to be a movie where there's not necessarily a bad guy. Do you know what I mean? That's a tragedy. If you think about Cronenberg's version of The Fly, the monster is, you have empathy. At no point are you like, this person's evil. It's empathy. He has a disease.
Related to that real quickly with The Fly, you've mentioned several times, it is a transformation, and I know you're saving for the movie, it would seem, what the Wolfman's final transformation might look like. But was it fun just digging into that side of horror and doing a creature feature and designing that?
Oh, hell yes. It's so fun. I love that I got to make a creature feature and really prioritize practical makeup effects. I really spent a lot of time interviewing people and researching who was going to be the person for this. And we talked to a lot of really talented makeup artists, but in the end I chose Arian Tushin, who's just a brilliant, Oscar-nominated makeup artist. And I mean, the guy's story is incredible. He's from Holland, but he came to the US, I think when he was 16, and was a protege of Dick Smith. And then he worked for Rick Baker, and then he worked for Stan Winston. Like it's his school, his makeup school was all the best. You know, it was nuts, and he just really treats it like an art. So it was really fun to dive in with him and think a lot about what prosthetic makeup looks like on camera. I've never really done that before on a huge scale.
I can't wait to see what it looks like when I see the finished film.
Yeah, man. I mean, we're saving it. Look, all I can say is I'm Australian, so it's genetically difficult for me to give any credit to myself. But I can say you can trust in Aryan. This guy's an artist, and he's brilliant, and he loves the Wolfman like you do. And so for any fans out there wondering about what we've done with this movie, just rest assured we have done everything possible to create something horrendous and horrific, but also empathetic and memorable. I mean, in a perfect world, this would go down in history with Jeff Goldblum in The Fly or Rick Baker's work in American Werewolf. Like we're trying to imprint on people's consciousness here, trying to create something iconic, you know.
Or scar them deeply.
Scar them deeply. But we also wanted to take an approach that was more grounded. Like I wasn't necessarily going for the super heightened Transylvanian version of this. If you think about Invisible Man, it's along those lines. It's grounded.
Leigh, I could talk to you about this a lot longer, but
yeah.
I've been given the signal, and thank you for coming by, and I look forward to
Thanks for having
seeing
us.
the movie.
Do I get to take one of these toys home? What's the deal?
You could get a photo with one.
Get a photo? Oh, come on. All right, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.